My name is Jamie Aliagil Girolona, and we're going to talk about water pollution. What is water pollution? Water pollution occurs when harmful substances, often chemicals or microorganisms, contaminate a stream, river, lake, ocean, aquifer, or other bodies of water, degrading water quality and rendering it toxic to humans or the environment. Water quality management is concerned with the control of pollution from human activity so that the water is not degraded to the point that it is no longer suitable for intended uses. Originally, the intent of water quality management was to protect the intended uses of a water body while using water as an economic means of waste disposal within the constraints of its assimilative capacity. This chapter deals first with the major types of pollutants and their sources. Water pollutants and their sources. Point sources. Domestic sewage and industrial waste are called point sources because they are generally collected by a network of pipes or channels and conveyed to a single point of discharge into the receiving water. The term municipal sewage is used to mean domestic sewage into which industrial wastes are also discharged. Domestic sewage consists of waste from homes, schools, office buildings, and stores. Point sources pollution can be reduced or eliminated through waste minimization and proper wastewater treatment prior to discharge to a natural water body. Non-point sources. Urban and agricultural runoff are characterized by multiple discharge points. These are called non-point sources. Often the polluted water flows over the surface of the land or along natural drainage channels to the nearest water body. Non-point pollution from urban stormwater, and in particular stormwater collected in combined sewers that carry both stormwater and municipal sewage, requires major engineering work to correct. Much of the non-point source pollution occurs during rainstorms or spring snowmelt, resulting in large flow rates that make treatment even more difficult. Oxygen-demanding material. Anything that can be oxidized in the receiving water with the consumption of dissolved molecular oxygen is termed oxygen-demanding material. This material is usually biodegradable organic matter but also includes certain inorganic compounds. The consumption of dissolved oxygen poses a threat to fish and other higher forms of aquatic life that must have oxygen to live. The critical level of DO varies greatly among species. Oxygen-demanding materials in domestic sewage come primarily from human waste and food residue. Almost any natural occurring organic matter such as animal droppings, crop residues, or leaves that get into the water from non-point sources contribute to the depletion of dissolved oxygen. Nutrients. Nitrogen and phosphorus, two nutrients of primary concern, are considered pollutants because they are too much of a good thing. Thus, they must be present in rivers and lakes to support the natural food chain. Problems arise when nutrient levels become excessive and the food web is grossly disturbed, which causes some organisms to proliferate at the expense of others. Some major sources of nutrients are phosphorus-based detergents, fertilizers, and food processing waste. Pathogenic organisms. Microorganisms found in wastewater include bacteria, viruses, and protozoa excreted by diseased persons or animals. When discharged into surface water, they make the water unfit for drinking. If the concentration of pathogens is sufficiently high, the water may also be unsafe for swimming and fishing. Certain shellfish can be toxic because they are concentrate pathogenic organisms in their tissues, making the toxicity levels in the shellfish much greater than the levels in the surrounding water. Bacteria that have developed immunity to antibiotics are now being found in natural waters. The resistance of the bacteria appearing in natural waters is an ominous prelude to the future effectiveness of antibiotics. Suspended solids. Organic and inorganic particles that are carried by the wastewater into a receiving water are termed suspended solids. When the speed of the water is reduced by flowing into a pool or a lake, many of these particles settle to the bottom as sediment. In common usage, the word sediment also includes eroded soil particles that are being carried by water even if they have not yet settled. Colloidal particles that do not settle readily cause the turbidity found in many surface waters. Organic suspended solids may also exert an oxygen demand. Inorganic suspended solids are discharged by some industries but result mostly from soil erosions, which is particularly bad in the areas of logging, strip mining, and construction activity. As excessive sediment loads are deposited into lakes and reservoirs, the usefulness of the water is reduced. Salts. These salts are often measured by evaporation of a filtered water sample. The salts and other things that don't evaporate are called total dissolved solids. Although most people associate salty water with oceans and salt lakes, all water contains some salt. A problem arises when the salt concentration in normally fresh water increases to the point where the natural population of plants and animals is threatened, or the water is no longer useful for public supplies or irrigation. In addition, evapotranspiration causes the salts to be further concentrated. Thus, the salt concentration continuously increases as the water moves downstream. If the concentration gets too high, crop damage or soil poisoning can result. Concentrations of salts are discharged by many industries, and the use of salt on roads during the winter causes high salt levels in urban runoff, especially during the spring snowmelt. Pharmaceuticals and personal care products. These are a class of compounds that are applied externally or ingested by humans, pets, and other domesticated animals. They are released to the environment through the disposal of expired, unwanted, or excess medication to the sewage system by individuals, pharmacies, or physicians. Another source of PPCPs in the environment is through metabolic excretion, the excretion of chemically unaltered parent compound and metabolized byproducts in urine and feces. PCPs such as deodorant and sunscreens can be washed into our waterways during bathing, washing, and swimming. Some PCPs are also used as pest control agents. Endocrine disrupting chemicals. The class of chemicals known as endocrine disruptors or EDCs alters the normal physiological function of the endocrine system and can affect the synthesis of hormones. EDCs can mimic estrogens, androgens, or thyroid hormones or their antagonists. Although the structures of many EDCs bear little resemblance to that of natural hormones with which they interfere. Other EDCs include the polychlorinated biphenyls commonly used as pesticides such as atrazine and other triazine chemicals and the phthalates. They can also interfere with the regulation of reproductive and developmental processes in mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish. The chemicals can also alter the normal physiological function of the endocrine system and can affect the synthesis of hormones in the body. EDCs can also target tissues where the hormones exert their effect. Pesticides. The major classes of pesticides are herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. The most commonly used herbicides are atrazine, metolachlor, and alachlor. Herbicides are used to kill weeds. Chlorpyrifos, diazinon, and malathion are the typical insecticides used to kill insects that would otherwise destroy crops, gardens, and structures. Common fungicides are sulfur, chlorothalonil, and mancozeb. Heat. Although heat is not often recognized as a pollutant, those in the electric power industry are well aware of the problems of disposing of waste heat. Also, waters released by many industrial processes are much hotter than the receiving waters. In some environments, an increase of water temperature can be beneficial. For example, production of clams and oysters can be increased in some areas by warming the water. On the other hand, increases in water temperature can have negative impacts. Many important commercial and game fish, such as salmon and trout, live only in cool water. In some instances, the discharge of heated water from a power plant can completely block salmon migration. Higher temperatures can also increase the rate of oxygen depletion in areas where oxygen-demanding wastes are present. Water pollution and rivers. The objective of water quality management is simple to state: to control the discharge of pollutants so that water quality is not degraded to an unacceptable extent below the natural background level. However, controlling waste discharges must be a quantitative endeavor. We must be able to measure the pollutants, predict the impact of pollutant on water quality, determine the background water quality that would be present without human intervention, and decide the levels acceptable for intended uses of water. The impact of pollution on a river depends both on the nature of the pollutant and the unique characteristics of the individual river. Some of the most important characteristics include the volume and speed of water flowing in the river, the river's depth and type of bottom, and the surrounding vegetation. Other factors include the climate of the region, the mineral heritage of the watershed, land use patterns, and the types of aquatic life in the river. Water quality management for a particular river must consider all these factors. Total maximum daily load. Impaired waters are those that do not meet water quality standards that the states, territories, and authorized tribes have established for them. This assessment is made after assuming that point sources of pollution have installed minimum levels of pollution control technology. The law requires that these jurisdictions establish priority rankings for waters on the lists of developed total max and developed total maximum daily loads for these waters. A total maximum daily load specifies the maximum amount of pollutant that a water body can receive and still meet water quality standards. In addition, the total maximum daily loads allocates pollutant loadings, that is the mass of pollutant that may be contributed among point and non-point sources. The total maximum daily load is computed on a pollutant by pollutant basis for a list of pollutants. Additional categories include acids or bases measured as pH, pesticides, and mercury. The total maximum daily load computation is defined as total maximum daily loads equals the summation of waste load allocations plus summation of load allocations plus the margin of safety. The margin of safety is to account for uncertainty about the relationships between loads and water quality. Effect of oxygen-demanding wastes on rivers. The introduction of oxygen-demanding material, either organic or inorganic, into a river causes depletion of dissolved oxygen in the water. This poses a threat to fish and other higher forms of aquatic life if the concentration of oxygen falls below a critical point. To predict the extent of oxygen depletion, it is necessary to know how much waste is being discharged and how much oxygen will be required to degrade the waste. Organic oxygen-demanding materials are commonly measured by determining the amount of oxygen consumed during degradation in a manner approximating degradation in natural waters. In contrast to the theoretical oxygen demand, the chemical oxygen demand, or COD, is a measured quantity that does not depend on knowledge of the chemical composition of the substances in the water. In the COD test, a strong chemical oxidizing agent is mixed with the water sample and then boiled. The difference between the amount of oxidizing agent at the beginning of the test and the remaining at the end of the test is used to calculate the COD. The BOD test is an indirect measurement of organic matter because we actually measure only the change in dissolved oxygen concentration caused by the microorganisms as they degrade the organic matter. Although not all organic matter is biodegradable and the actual test procedures lack precision, the BOD test is still the most widely used method of measuring organic matter because of the direct conceptual relationship between BOD and oxygen depletion in receiving waters. As the concentration of organic matter decreases, so does the rate of oxygen consumption. Oxygen consumption is mostly associated with the decay of the bacteria that grew during the early part of the test. It is generally assumed that the rate at which oxygen is consumed is directly proportional to the concentration of degradable organic matter remaining at any time. This may be expressed as dL subscript T divided by dt is equal to negative R subscript A, where L subscript T is the oxygen equivalent of the organics remaining at time. Negative R subscript A is equal to negative K L subscript T. K is the reaction rate constant. This is the BOD rate equation. The ultimate BOD increases in direct proportion to the concentration of degradable organic matter. The numerical value of the rate constant is dependent on the following: the nature of the waste, the ability of the organisms in the system to utilize the waste, and lastly, the temperature. The nature of the waste. There are literally thousands of natural occurring organic compounds, not all of which can be degraded with equal ease. Simple sugars and starches are rapidly degraded and will therefore have a very large BOD rate constant. The BOD rate constant for a complex waste depends very much on the relative proportions of the various components. A summary of typical BOD rate constants is shown in Table 7.2. The lower rate constants for treated sewage compared to raw sewage result from the fact that easily degradable organic compounds are more completely removed than less readily degradable organic compounds during wastewater treatment. The ability of the microorganisms in the system to utilize the waste. Any given microorganism is limited in its ability to utilize organic compounds. As a consequence, many organic compounds can be degraded by only a small group of microorganisms. The BOD test should therefore be conducted with organisms that have been acclimated to the waste so that the rate constant determined in the laboratory can be compared to that in the river. Temperature. The most biological processes speed up as the temperature increases and slow down as the temperature drops, because oxygen utilization is caused by the metabolism of microorganisms. The rate of utilization is similarly affected by temperature. Ideally, the BOD rate constant should be experimentally determined for the temperature of the receiving water. There are two difficulties with this ideal. Often, the receiving water temperature changes throughout the year, so the large number of tests would be required to define K. An additional difficulty is the task of comparing data from various locations having different temperatures. Laboratory testing is therefore done at a standard temperature of 20 degrees Celsius, and the BOD rate constant is adjusted to the receiving water temperature using the following expression. Graphical determination of BOD constants. A variety of methods may be used to determine K and LO from an experiment set of BOD data. The simplest and least accurate method is to plot BOD versus time. The rate equation is used to solve for K. One simple method around this is called Thomas graphical method.